live, am I? All right. Okay. All right. So, very exciting. I've already seen in the chat box friends from Kazakhstan, friends from Ukraine, friends from all over the place. Absolutely incredible. All right. This has got to be it's very strange, isn't it, doing webinars? I've just literally finished feeding my family dinner, and now I'm here talking to you all. Okay. That's incredible. So, lovely, lovely to see you all. Thank you very much. I've just got to remember how I changed my slides. Okay, all right, I will remember this. I've had a rehearsal with Henry. Bear with me. So, the title of our talk today sounds rather grand. Content, context, and emotion in language learning. All right. But it boils down to something incredibly simple. So I hope I'm going to change my slide now. Ah, yes, okay, good. All right, I've remembered what to do. So, in other words, all I'm going to talk about really is making language meaningful by putting language into situations that the children, not necessarily, they don't just have to identify with them, but they have to grab their imaginations. And then something that we sometimes forget is expressing how we feel. So showing our emotions in our language, even if it's incredibly simple language, we can still show our emotions. And then with all those three things, we will also be having fun and being active. And of course, I'm going to be talking about this language in a primary situation, primary and pre-primary. Yeah? So we're talking about children really 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 upwards. Okay? So our little ones, basically, our babies. All right. Because we only have 45 minutes, I'm not going to do any theory on slides. We're going to be talking about it, in practice. So, classroom activities. All right. Throughout the talk, I will be referring at some point to this new book that I have written with my co-author, Jill Layton. It's called Learning Stars, and it's a pre-primary course for little ones. Jill Layton is the author of Captain Jack. I'm sure some of you will remember Captain Jack. Lovely book. All right, it's got a very strong phonics element. She wrote the phonics lessons in there. So some of the slides will be referring to this book, Learning Stars. Okay? All right, okay, so that's just to introduce that. So here we are, and as you can see, our lesson here, Unit 4, is on the farm. All right, and we're doing the animals. It's very important, we all know, with our children, to be clear, to be very clear and unmuddled about our language. So to begin with, of course, we always just give a regular language vocabulary presentation. And don't forget, when we do our vocabulary presentations, we shouldn't muddle it with too much other language, okay? So we don't say, oh, look at the brown horse. When we're teaching the word horse, we just say horse, cow, sheep, hen, etc. Yeah? This is, I remind people of this because we forget about it in the classroom. We sometimes feel we have to be too complicated and we muddle our language. So we need to be clear to start with. Once we've been clear, then of course we can go on and do more fun things with our language. And of course here, you can see here in activity 3, little boy pretending to be a hen here. This is very, very simple. Now, it's very simple, but it is still a drama activity. Yeah? It's a little bit of mime and a little bit of improvisation. All right? So the children, of course, can start off with pretending to be the different animals. All right, I'm not telling you anything new here, I know that. This is just to ease ourselves in, that we can do these kind of things very, very simply. All right, and then, of course, we're going to add some context. We've already got the context of a farm. And here we've got our character, Horsey. All right, he's our main character in the book. And he's very interested in the ducks, you can see. And of course, poor old Horsey, he's always getting into trouble. He's leaning too far over the fence, and of course he falls in the duck pond. All right. So a little bit of humor there for the children. All right. So how will Horsey feel when he falls in the duck pond? All right. We can play around with this. So we can just immediately start. So he can be saying here, I think his language here is, oh, look at the ducks. Okay? All right. Now then, just let's take that first bit of language, look at the ducks. Instead of us all repeating it around the classroom, we can act it out. And we can start off by pretending to be Horsey, saying, look at the ducks. How might Horsey say it? Oh, look at the ducks. Oh, no, that's a donkey, isn't it? Okay. Nay, look at the ducks. All right. And then when he's fallen in the pond, okay, his situation has changed, hasn't it? So even though this is an extremely simple, basic situation, we can still make a lot of this in our lesson. First, they can look at all the animals on the farm. They can pretend to be at them. Then we can have all the children. How do we sound when we're excited? Yeah? So this is when we add emotion. Yeah? So we're adding emotion. Oh, look at the ducks. All right? What about if you're frightened of ducks? All right, Horsey isn't frightened here. But we can add different emotions. Oh, look at the ducks. We can say the same language in many, many different ways. Now, what about when Horsey is in the pond? All right? He might feel a bit annoyed and a bit wet. The children might have first-hand experience of feeling annoyed and wet. It's the kind of thing that happens to children. They fall into puddles. They fall over. So this is not. So they might then want to speak in this way. Oh, look at the ducks. In other words, we can say the same very, very, very simple language using lots of different emotions. All right. Can I just check? So you can all hear me, okay? And so we're talking here about emotions, just adding emotion to very, very simple language, okay? Can we have a thumbs up? Do we like this activity, this very simple activity? Very simple there to just add little emotions. Okay, lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you very much. Excellent. All right. So we can do this in all sorts of different ways. All right. Lovely. Okay. So now, of course, there are lots of other little activities we can do. We're staying here on the topic of animals. All right. And here, this is just a little party game, actually. Do you know the game musical statues? You put on some music and you dance around the room. When the music stops, when the teacher stops the music, you freeze. Okay? It's a game that we play at parties, at children's parties, especially in England. All right. So, but of course we can adapt these party games and we can play, for example, animal statues. All right. So then you call out the animal names that you're teaching at that moment. Okay? So you're going to be teaching horse, hen, duck, etc. All right. They've got to now dance like the animals. All right? So you've got to dance like a horse or you dance like a duck. And then when you stop the music, so you play the music, you call out duck. Ducks, everyone be ducks, dance like ducks. And then they're all going to be quacking around and dancing like ducks. Stop the music, freeze. And they've got to freeze like a duck. All right, of course, it doesn't matter how they freeze. It's just a bit of fun. All right. So in other words, these are just an adaptation of a little party game. All right. Okay. Now then, there's a, you know the jokes knock knock. Who's there? This is another simple little activity to start thinking and speaking in different ways according to characters. All right. So it depends on what you're teaching. All right. Show the children a choice of different characters. Let's stay with animals again. All right. Here I put, for example, a giant, a king, a dragon, a mouse. We could stay with animals. All right. We could have a duck, a horse, a sheep, etc. All right. One of the children goes outside, or if they're very young, two of them go outside the door. Okay. And then they knock on the door. All right, knock, knock, knock. And you, all the class say, come in. All right, you open the door. They come in. They don't say anything. They don't say, I'm a duck. Okay, they say your target language. So let's say your target language is, hello, how are you? All right, they come in to the room and they act and they speak in character. All right, so they're going to come in and they're going to say, hello, how are you, as if they are ducks. All right, so how might you do that? All right, it's up to them. All right. Quack, quack. Hello, hello, how are you? All right, and the other children, guess who's come in? All right, and it's quite good when children respond very well to this kind of imaginative play. But they often really appreciate you giving them an example first. So you and the child could go out of the room first of all, and you could decide to be ducks or horses. And then you could decide how you're going to speak. And you'll find the children to begin with will just copy your way of acting, all right? And again, this is mime, this is a drama activity. They're going to come in and they're going to speak in character, okay? Of course, it doesn't actually matter if they have got the voice of a duck right or a voice of a horse right, because we don't know how a duck speaks, do we? So, okay. So again, a very, very simple controlled activity and quite easy to play with all the class, because as we know, all the children like to get a turn of doing everything, and it's quite easy for them all just to go outside the door and come in. Knock, knock, who's there? You could even extend the language. Knock, knock, who's there? Okay, come in. All right? Okay. Do we like this? That's it. Where are all your... Do you know where all your little tools are? You've got some tools somewhere. Yeah, that's right. I don't know. I get confused with this. The trouble with webinars, you feel like you want to do them again afterwards when you know what you're doing. Okay. The same with lessons, isn't it? Okay. All right. So that's knock, knock. Who's there? All right. Now here's another party game, or another playground game, but we can do it in the class. All right, and this is follow my leader. All right, again, I'm sure you do kind of things with your little ones. So the children walk around the class in a line, and then you give the leader a flashcard, all right, of an animal or of a character. So I put here examples of a crocodile or a princess to be two very different characters. You give the leader, the first child in the line, a flashcard. And then the leader will change how he or she walks according to the character that he's going to become. So if he's a crocodile, he might start walking slowly and have a mean look. He might even want to go down on all fours and walk like a crocodile and maybe start to look very dangerous. If the leader is a princess, then he or she might want to stand up. Doesn't matter. A boy can still act like a princess. We can do all sorts of nice things. Sorry, let me just interrupt myself here. This is one of the nice things about drama, is that you can be a little bit iconoclastic. In other words, you can change the way that people think sometimes. You can do different things. So a boy could play the part of a princess. All right. This helps us to be less stereotypical as well. Helps to enlarge our children's way of thinking, which is a very important part of education. All right, so then if the child is a princess, then of course they might want to act as if they got long hair and are very graceful. Might be a naughty princess. You can add other adjectives as well. And then they all have to mimic those movements, all right? And then the leader goes to the back of the line, and you go round, and there's a new leader at the front, and you give another flashcard, all right? Now, this is vocabulary, of course. So they're going to see if they recognize, or you might give them the word a crocodile or a princess. That would be a vocabulary little test to see if they can read those words. This is for very young children. But you could also add language to this activity as well. So again, let's stay with our very, very simple language. Our simple language is hello, how are you? Again, all right. And how might a crocodile say, hello, how are you? All right. They will have their own ideas about this. So a crocodile, you know, we think of them. Different countries think of animals in different ways as well. In England, definitely we would think of a crocodile as being cunning, okay, and he wants to eat us, basically. Frightening, dangerous. All right, so a crocodile might say, oh, hello, how are you? Num, 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 num. A princess, how might a princess talk? Oh, hello, how are you? But the children will have their own ideas. And again, it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. All right, so they can move. It's very important for our children to be moving and doing things so they don't get bored. Not just so they don't get bored, so they're using it's holistic learning. Holistic learning in the best sense, that you use your whole mind and your whole body to learn. All right, so that's little follow my leader. Okay. Okay, all right, let me just see here, because I'm sure, that's right, okay, so I'm trying, it's difficult to try and keep a, oh well, Henry can tell me about all the different chat things anyway later. All right, so now then, what I've done is I've shown how we can extend this and add even more content and emotion, and I've just taken the, staying with animals again, staying with the same main theme, and here we've got the ugly ducklings. All right. Now, the children often do respond to this very simple fairy tale that we all know about the ugly ducklings. Yes, the poor little duckling got no friends. All right, so we can start off. Anything we do, we can divide it up into lots of different sections. So this is how I've shown you step by step. This is not from the book. This is just other ideas, okay. So first of all, how do ducklings walk, swim, wiggle their tails? Now then, here we've got the words ducklings, and we've got lots of different verbs for movement. All right. There's no limitation on the different, on the amount of language that little ones can learn, as long as we're clear. They don't have to learn it off by heart. They don't have to remember it the next day, but you can play this kind of game again and again and again, and gradually it'll go in. So how do ducklings walk? Well, they waddle, don't they? How do they swim? Oh, well, they're a bit frightened when they're swimming in the water. They need their mummies, don't they? And how do they wiggle their tails? So you can just have fun, you know, walk and swim and wiggle your tails like little ducklings. This is fun, but it's also language learning as well. Okay, so we don't just do drama activities without language. We always connect them with language in our lessons. All right, and here we've got follow my leader, waddling like ducks. So ducklings and cygnets, in other words, you know, baby swans, they follow their mums. They always walk behind their mums. And you can play follow my leader, and you can all waddle like ducks. All right. And again, you can connect it to language. You know, where are we going, Mum? We're going to the pond. I'm hungry, Mum. You can add. You can just choose little bits of language. Don't overload them with language, but choose little bits. And they could all walk behind their mum saying, we're hungry, we're hungry, we're hungry, we're hungry. Something like that. Something, just a bit of fun. All right. All right, and then we could play bottoms up. All right, that's fun. Children like doing this. So they dance like ducks, waddle around, and then when you stop the music, they've got to bend right over. And you can say bottoms up. All right. So that's just a little bit of fun again for them. But of course, they're learning they're learning a part of the body as well that we don't normally teach, but that is very important for little children to learn. Okay, so that's bottoms up. Okay. Now we can talk about the emotions as well. We can talk about the emotions. So how do they feel when how do you feel when you're playing with your friends? All right, they can talk about this. When we're playing with our friends and we're, you know, everybody's friends, everybody likes us, then we feel happy, okay? They might not all say they feel happy, because we can start to think, because children are very often unhappy at school. Something's happened to bother them. You know, somebody's taken their sandwich, or somebody's not speaking to them. All sorts of things bother our children. And when we're teachers, it's very important that we're aware of when they're bothered and when they're not. So we can start to talk about when they feel, how you feel when you're playing with your friends, and then we can start to talk about how does it feel when your friends don't want to play with you. So we're taking the theme of the ugly duckling, but we're going into the emotions of it. All right. So the children might want to talk about it in their own language. But you might want to teach them that you feel sad, you know, you don't feel happy. And also, of course, we're teaching values as well. We're teaching them, you know, good behavior as well. And that's always a big part of our job, isn't it, with our little ones, to teach them how to be communicative and to be kind to each other. And children, and when we talk about these things with the children, they also realize that they're not the only ones to feel like that. Because sometimes you usually, when you're little, when you're 5 years old, it doesn't occur to you that everybody shares that experience, that everybody knows what it feels like. You feel like you're the only one, and that nobody wants to play with you, and you're the only one. So it's very good if we can talk about these things, you know, through the fairy tales. And then, of course, when you feel sad, you can start to act it out, you know. And again, you can say things with the emotion. So even if you just stay with that very, very basic language, hello, how are you? We could, you know, we could just say it. How are you going to say that? If your friends don't want to play with you, you'll hardly be able to speak when you're little like that. Oh, hello, hello. Children don't want to speak. Sometimes they don't say anything at all, so we can mumble things as well. But we can show that these are all different ways of speaking. And again, we can practice our language and we can play around with it. And then we can think, how do we make ourselves feel better as well? How do we make ourselves feel better? So we can help each other like that. So in other words, we're going into lots of different contexts and lots of different emotion there. And then here, I'm just showing how we could extend this ugly duckling theme into a project. And here's a nice little simple project. Very, very simple. I don't know if you've done this kind of thing in your class. You just get a plastic container, put some water in it, and put a little bit of blue ink in it. Wonderful fun. And then you can make plasticine, rocks, and then, so you make your own little pond, you can make little boats, and then, of course, this is a little lesson you could make from this, what sinks and what floats. All right. And to see what sinks and what floats, you try different things. You know, you could try a straw, you can try a metal paper clip, try a little bit of paper, you can try a coin, and you could start to make lists, what sinks and what floats, what makes a difference. All right, so these are all different ways of extending that. Okay, nice. Are we all happy out there? Everybody happy? All right. Okay, yep, a bit of science, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, all right, okay. All right, can you all hear me okay? Yeah, is the audio okay there? Well, Henry will tell me if it's not, I guess. Hang on, let me just check that everything's okay there. Okay. All right. So, okay. So, as I said, there's lots of different party games that we can use, and here in Unit 10 of Learning Styles, we're ending up the book with the party. And here the little children are doing a little color dance here, all right, in Activity 3. And it's got a song to do with it, so they all wear different colors, and when their color is called out, a red, 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 I can't remember, wiggle like a jelly or something. I can't remember the actual song now. Then they can play. So, okay, so here we are. This is just a little, you just give the children, very easy to make flashcards, and then just put them around the neck with a piece of string and some clips, yeah? And then when you call out their color, and again, you could do this with anything. This is colors. You could do it with animals. You can do it with any kind of different vocabulary. All right? And then when you call out them, they have to get up and dance. So it's just, it's a listening activity, really. A listening activity. Okay. All right. And here's another party game, and it's Pass the Parcel. All right. So I don't know if you've ever played this game. Again, this is what the kind of games that we play in children's birthday parties in England. All right, and what you do is you just get one in the game. You have one present, and you wrap it up with lots and lots and lots of different layers. Okay, and then you pass it round a circle of children. And when the music stops, again, you play the music. When the music stops, you unwrap one layer, and then the music starts again, and you unwrap a layer. And then the person finishing the game has the present, the last one to unwrap the parcel. All right, but what we could do here is you put lots of flashcards into a big envelope. All right, don't let the children see the pictures. Play the music. Then the children sit in a circle at their desk and pass the parcel, the envelope, from one to another. Then when you stop the music, the child opens the envelope, takes out one flashcard, looks at the flashcard privately. Okay, what's it got on the flashcard? And you've got to mime what is on the flashcard. So, again, it could be anything, all right? So let's imagine that you've got fruit, all right? You eat different fruits in different ways. So if you if you've got a flashcard of a banana, you're going to take your banana and you're going to mime peeling the banana, eat it, and the other children guess, it's a banana. Yes. If you've got an apple, then you're going to take the apple, wash it, teach good manners, okay, good habits. Yum, 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 yum. That's my apple. Children shout out, it's an apple, yes, etc. So you can put anything in your flashcards. Again, it's just another way of teaching vocabulary, all right, but with very simple, that you're involving, again, the whole child and having fun at the same time. Okay, all right, so here we've got a CLIL lesson, actually, from Learning Stars, and we're talking about what weather conditions make a rainbow. And of course we've got sunny weather and we've got rainy weather, and together we're learning the colors here, of course. All right, so we've got all the colors of the rainbow. All right, so this is the, now then what we can do with we can use our imaginations in lots of different ways. So one of our very easy activities to do is just to get a shoebox. All right. Get a shoebox and wrap it with nice colored paper. So you've got your own personal magic box, and it's an empty box. Okay, but it's not empty when we have our imagination. So what you can do is you pretend to pull things out from the magic box. Okay. Now then, here what I've done is you can pull lots of things out, but you can pull out something simple like an apple. You can pull out an apple, eat it. What is it? But you can pull out other things. Okay. So if you've got your box, you could pull out the night. Okay. And the night goes up into the sky, and you look at all the stars, and maybe you hear tweet-twoo, 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 ooh, ooh. And at night we go to sleep. And then the children guess what it was that you pull out. All right. So they might say owl. They might know the bird. But eventually they might realize that you can imagine to be pulling out the night. Of course, you can't pull the night out of a box. So we're extending their imaginations. You could pull out a whole elephant, and as you're pulling out the elephant, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're looking at it. So again, all these things, what I do with the children is I do them first. Okay? And then it gives them ideas. They get other ideas. And of course, it's very important when we're doing any kind of drama and imaginative activities to join in with them. Okay? So if they pull out the rain, and they're doing it in a rather strange way and you can't really understand, you do them the credit of understanding what they're doing, okay? And to be admiring of them. Very, very important to show our admiration for them as we're teaching them. Okay? So of course we can do, so for instance here you could pull out a rainbow, couldn't you? What's this? Red, yellow, orange, and then you can look at the big arc in the sky. Oh, it's a rainbow. Oh, it's raining. It's sunny. It's a rainbow. Okay, so these are lots of little ideas. You can adapt them yourselves. Okie dokie. All right. Okay. Are we all happy here? I can't see. I don't know why I can't see the chat messages for some reason. Oh well. Okay. Okay. All right. There we are. There's some. That's nice. Oh good. Oh good. We've got some nice smiley faces. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. All right. So here we've got food. All right. And this is again from Unit 7 of Learning Stars. And Horsey and his friends and Bella the butterfly, they're having a picnic. All right, now then, I don't know, you can't see Unit 6, Activity 6 very well, but what they've done there is they've got a paper plate. You get a paper plate, your own paper plate, and you cut out or you draw pictures of food and you stick them on your paper plates. And then you've got your own personal food props. And of course here the children are singing a song about, you know, I don't know, they're hungry and their tummy's yummy, yummy, yummy in my tummy song. Wiggling around there. Okay, so let's see what else we can do with food. All right, so now we can extend all of this to, let's have a picnic in the class. All right, first of all, we do it step by step, just as we do everything with our children. First of all, we decide, what do we want to pack for our picnic? And we get the children to think of lots of different food ideas, so they can think of their favorite foods, what do they like and what do they don't like. And what are they going to take on their picnic? Anything's allowed, because it's not a real picnic here, it's a pretend picnic. All right, and now we can start to use mime in different ways, and we can think about how we eat different foods. All right, so what about hot drinks? And what about cold drinks? How do we drink a hot drink, and how do we drink a cold drink? All right, these are ideas that are new to the children, maybe, miming this. So, you know, if you've got a hot chocolate, you're going to drink like this, you know. Ooh, ooh, what am I drinking? Is it hot or is it cold? Okay, and then you mime it. And if you've got a cold drink, a cold drink, is it hot or is it cold? All right, so these are different ways. And the children can mime that. They can all sit around and mime their eating and drinking. And then, of course, you can extend it to location. Where shall we go? Where shall we go for our picnic? And according to where we go, what will we see? What will we hear? All right. So they can choose. They can choose their location. They might want to go to the beach or the countryside. They might want to have a picnic in their town, somewhere nice in their own town. Maybe in one of the nice squares there. All right. Now then, according to where we go and where we go, we can imagine what we'll see and what we'll hear. And of course, this is where we can start to create sound landscapes. All right. So, if we're at the beach, what will we hear? What might we hear at the beach? Okay. So, we might hear the sea, we hear waves, we hear birds, we might hear children playing, we might hear people selling ice creams, we might hear all sorts of things. And then what you can do is, some of you will have been to my workshops and we play these games together. Obviously, it's much better if you're all in one room rather than all around the world. Then we divide up the class into different sections. So one group of children will be the sea. Another group of children will be seagulls. Another group of children will be children playing. And they make the sound. So the sea or the sea children, shh. And then the seagulls, oh, 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 oh. Okay, not a very good seagull. And the children play, hee-haw, 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 hoo-haw. They're making noise like children playing. And then you put them all together and you create not a landscape, but a soundscape. And then within that soundscape, you can add bits of dialogue as well. So you can set your location. You can bring the outside world into the classroom like that. Okay, very easy to do that. Okay, all right. And then, of course, we can do other things. So how do we lay a cloth? How do we lay a picnic cloth? So first of all, what you can do to help the children to do mime, okay, you get a real cloth. And then, of course, that's quite difficult for the children to all grab hold of, you know, 4 corners of the cloth and then put it on the floor without it all getting into a big muddle. Okay, these are their motor skills they're practicing. But then, once they've done that, you can start to get them to realize what they're doing and to take away the cloth and say, now pretend to put down the cloth. Okay, so how are they doing it? Are they going to shake it out? How are they standing? And then they're going to lay down their cloth. So get the picnic ready, put the cloth. And this is a bit of fun, really, again, just to put the language into context. Okay? All right. All right, and of course, when we have a picnic, we might have to watch out for insects. Yeah? So if insects come along, you know, sometimes they're annoying, and sometimes we get frightened of insects. All right, so this might be an opportunity for us to show the children you don't have to be frightened of insects, but you do have to be careful of them. So we might want to, so if the ants come, oh, that's not very nice. We don't want to eat a sandwich with ants, do we? So, but if there are ants on our imaginary sandwich, what would we look like? Okay, ooh, I've got ants in my mouth. That's not very nice. All right, and then you could pretend to all be ants. Half of the children could be ants, couldn't they? Coming along to the picnic. We're ants, we're hungry, we're ants, we're hungry. Oh, I like sandwiches. Oh, ants come and take the sandwiches. So you could make a little game. What about when wasps come? Oh, and you're trying to drink, you have to bat it away. So you could teach them different language for different insects. Yeah? Bees, wasps, butterflies. When butterflies come, we like them, don't we? They're insects, but we love butterflies. They're very pretty. All right. So we could maybe help the children to not be so frightened of insects by reminding them of there are beautiful insects as well. So you could teach them, okay, come on ants, all the ants come, all the ants march. All the wasps come along, and we've got to try and get the wasps away. These are all just basic little ideas for you. You can do more with these, obviously, all of this with your children in the classrooms. All right. Now then, of course, on our picnic as well, what about if the weather changes? All right. So if the weather changes, for a start, how do we react? And what do we do? And how do we feel? And how do we eat? And how do we speak? So all these things change with the weather. So if it's windy, oh dear, how do we eat our sandwich if it's windy? Okay, well, our hair goes in our mouth and everything. It's not very nice. And maybe some of our drinks are getting, our cups are getting blown away. Oh, and maybe we want to do a windy day dance. All right. And sometimes when it's windy, we have to speak louder as well. All right, don't we? So we can change our language at the same time as we change our weather. So what about if it's raining? What about if it's raining and we eat a sandwich in the rain? Not very nice, is it? It's all wet. Okay, so these are different things. And of course here, what you're doing is you're teaching the weather vocabulary at the same time. All right. And thinking, you know, how do we move? How do we talk? How do we walk when it rains? What about if it snows in our picnic? We could go for a picnic in the snow. We can do anything we want in our classroom. What about if it's very, very hot? We're exhausted. We don't speak very loudly then, do we, when it's very hot? All right, what about if it's very cold? Okay, so all these different things, again, you can just teach, you could just do this whole picnic activity for a whole week, adding lots of different elements to it, building up their language at the same time. Okay, all right, and then of course, again, we know, as I say, we do teach values to our children at the same time, and of course we don't hang us up. We don't want to, we want them to teach them to be, you know, responsible in the countryside or wherever they are, and we mustn't leave litter. And a very good way of practicing this is you put a big bin and you give all the children a piece of litter. Okay, just a piece of clean litter, obviously a paper cup or an old piece of paper that you don't want to use in the classroom. And they've got to go and find the litter, and again you could play music, and they've got to come up one by one. They could all come up in a row. You could all dance round, music stops, put the litter in the bin, put the litter in the bin. Okay. And the more you make it a game, the more that the children will do it. And of course you can do it that as you're going around the school. You know, supposing you see some litter in the playground. Oh, you know, the thing with some of these sort of things that our children have to do, they're often taught, somehow we teach them about them in a very negative way. We tell people off, oh, you put litter there, don't do that. But if with our little children, if we can make it fun, that they will want to do it, that it is actually fun trying to get a basketball, you know, chuck the... playing basketball with your litter. And of course if you don't get it in the bin, you've got to go and pick it up and keep throwing it in the bin until you do it, or you can just stand and put it in the end. Okay? Alright, okay. I think we're coming up to the end now. Okay, and again, this is how we can, so these are the little plastic, the paper plates here you can see. You can make little mini picnic cloths. These are projects that we're, you know, going into really here. And then it's very easy to paste these images of food onto circles of card or onto paper plates and then glue them to napkins. You could have your whole little, you know, ready-made tablecloth. Or I think it's probably best to keep it separately. Have your tablecloths and have your paper plates. And they can practice. So they make their own personal picnic. Okay. All right, so, and then this is a little lesson. This is my last one, actually. We're finishing now, so if we've got some questions and things like that, we can go on to that. So this is, again, it's food, and this is from from Unit 7 in Learning Styles. And Horsey and the children are having a picnic, and I don't know how well you can see that first frame. The foxes have come and taken their food. Oh, naughty foxes. Okay, they've got no picnic left. But luckily they are surrounded by very generous animals, and their little bee brings them honey. And again, the language is very simple. So it's, I'm a bee. This is honey. It's for you. It's very simple language, okay? I'm a cow. I've got milk. This is milk. I can't remember exactly the language now. This is milk. It's for you. Thank you. Thank you, cow. I'm a hen. These are eggs. This is for you, etc. All right? And the tree and the apple tree as well, bringing apples. I'm a tree. I've got apples. All right. So in this incredibly simple language, this is for you. It's for you. We've got obviously this whole, sorry, activities of what food, what animals bring us which food. And again, this is what we do in Learning Stars. I don't know if you can see the rubric right at the very bottom. It says, act out the story. Well, this is a very incredibly simple language, but there's so much you can do with this. For a start, you can, how will the children feel when they see the naughty foxes taking their food? How would they say, oh, come back, my food. We've got no food. And then when the bees come, okay, how will the bees talk? Okay, so how will the bees say, this is for you? Yeah. I'm a bee. So very, very simple language. And then how will the children react? Okay, they'll be very grateful, very happy. Thank you. Very important that we get our children to be expressive as they speak. Yeah. So that's what it's all about. And I think that is it. Let me just check here rather than going off head, because I've actually got it all down here on paper. Yes, that is it. So do we have any questions? Let me see if I can see any questions here. We've got like a few minutes left if there's any questions here. Okay, thank you. No, we're all had. Can we, okay, all right. Can we add a bit? Yes, okay. All right, so now in terms of timing, okay, somebody asked me about how long would it take for each activity. I think it's almost impossible to say how long you'll spend on one activity. Number one, children like repetition. Number two, they don't want to stay too long on one activity, but they do often like to do the same thing and again and again and again. All right, so I would never stay too long on each activity. I think if you're all going to, you know, play a game or something like that, 5 minutes, something like that, and then do them down. Now, one thing I will say is that whenever you do any kind of drama activity, and all these things, however simple they are, they're kind of drama activities, always have ready something that is a quiet, sitting down activity for them to do afterwards. Okay, it's no point in, there's no good with little ones just saying, okay, sit down now, finish, sit down, keep quiet, okay, stop. They're not going to. All right. So what you need to do is you need to have some photocopied worksheets or your activity book from your main book or whatever it is you do, something that they will be familiar with, and you hand it out and you say, okay, you've got to color this and you've got to match this. You've got to give them a sitting down quiet activity to do, and this is their preparation. So you can have all the fun and be doing all the different things, but you must have an activity ready. Otherwise, the more you tell them to sit down and be quiet, the less they will do it, because you're just creating panic basically. So you need to just make sure that they know. It's very nice for children to have all this different getting up and doing things, but children also need quiet, focused time as well. And and that will be led by you, that you will say that, okay, now we're going to sit down and we're just going to look at our books. Time to look, time to observe, time to be quiet. All those things are very, very important. Okay, any more questions? Okay, that's good. Thank you, thank you. I'm very pleased that you agree there. Good, very nice. Okay, any more questions then? Okay. Yeah, I would say if we have 45 minutes in total, yeah, then you could do 5 or 10 minutes per session. Yeah, Yeah, I think I think it depends on the age. When they're pre-primary, you're going to be doing a lot more of these, getting up and doing activities. When it's primary, when it's a primary class, when they're grade 2 or grade 3, they're going to be doing a little bit more reading and writing and sitting at the desk activities. But I would say you definitely need within that time to have 10-15 minutes where children are actually doing things. But it can be broken up, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And also, and one more thing is finish your lesson with something quiet. So you don't want to all be playing, bottoms up with the ducks game and then send them out to another lesson because they'll be too excited. Okay, and then the other teacher will have to calm them down. So, yeah, you finish off with something quiet. Finish off with something quiet. Okay, let me just see if there's any other questions here. Okay, hang on a second here. Yeah, and sorry, somebody's asked about the phonics teaching. Absolutely. A lot of these activities can be integrated with phonics teaching, and this is a whole other talk, really. But yeah, definitely. And actually, in learning styles, there's a very, very strong phonics strand. And there's proper phonics lessons with all these different characters and lots of different activities that you can do. Definitely, yeah. That would be a whole other talk about the phonics. But definitely, you can, you could get them to recognize the sounds as well as the words. Yep. Okay. All right. Okay. Any other? All right. And vocabulary. Well, vocabulary. Somebody's asked about the vocabulary, but all of this is teaching different vocabulary. Yeah. So if you look at the last lesson, you're going to be teaching here bee, cow, hen, tree, and honey, milk, egg, apples, etc. So this is all vocabulary teaching. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Somebody said, how big should the class be? Well, the thing is that with big classes, obviously, if you've got like 40 children or something like that, then you need even more careful planning. But you can definitely do these activities. They don't always have to be up and away from their desks. You do need more than 2 children, I think, to do these activities. I think you need 2 or 3 children. But if you can still do them with big classes as well, and don't forget you can still be active and be miming things. If you've got a very large class and not very much space in your classroom, as I know a lot of you have that situation, you can still mime being a bee or bringing honey when you're sitting at your table. It's very nice if the children can stand up and move around and dance, but you don't have to. You can still be very active at your desk. They can just stand up and sit down at their table. You don't need to have a lot of space. Okay. All right, let's see. Any more? I don't know how you make this chat box bigger. Okay. All right. Okay, all right. Well, I think that's it for me. I can't see any other. It's difficult for me to see other things. So, thank you very much. Thank you. It was lovely having you all here. I can't believe how many of you there were. I wish I could have met you all in person. Okay. All right. Okay, so, over to you then, Henry. Is that okay?
That's fine, yeah. Thank you, John. I think I'm going to be honest and say that was the most entertaining session we've had so far today. Loads of positive feedback, and I particularly enjoyed the animal impressions. I'm a big fan of ducks myself, so yeah, that was a treat.
You'll be playing bottom.
Oh, I will. Yes, most definitely. Thanks for the ideas, and yeah, I'm sure everyone enjoyed that as much as I did too. Round of applause. That was great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
If everyone wants to enjoy those impressions again, they'll be on our website when the recording goes up. So watch out for that. John, would you just like to say goodbye before I hand over to Dave for our next talk?
Lovely, lovely. Okay, yes, lovely. Okay, well, thanks very much, everybody. And Henry, you've told everybody about the certificates and things like that, have you?
I have, yeah, but I'll just mention it again. The certificates are going to be emailed to you at the end of today's session via the email address that you registered for. So that's how you'll get hold of them once all the primary talks are finished this afternoon.
Okay. Lovely. Okay, all right, well, bye from me. So I just click off my video now, do I? Is that right, Henry?
Yeah, that's right. Click off and you can X out of the room.
All right.
Is done. Thanks again.
Okay, lovely. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Bye. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you for that nice introduction. Thank you also, Henry, for building me up to do animal impressions in my session. I'd like to make it clear at the beginning that I will not be doing any animal impressions, although I did very much enjoy them in the last session. Thank you, Jeanne, for that. So, first question, let's just check. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you click on the hand if everything's coming through okay? So that, good. Oh, that's fairly positive feedback. Good. In that case, I'll plow on and tell you a little bit about myself first. As you already know, as Henry has said, you can see on the screen, my name is Dave Tucker, and I'm coming to you from Portugal today. I work in the very cute, small school of International Health in Santa Clara. In Portugal, Santa Clara is in Coimbra, or it's part of Coimbra, which is right smack in the middle of Portugal, about halfway up. We'll be coming back to Portugal in a little moment. Let me just talk about the session first. As you can see, it's called Stop, Think, Learn. And these will be the three main threads running through the session. Three areas of interest for me that are informing my classes this year, I hope. And I'm going to be experimenting and see how it works. I'll be working through them in reverse order, and I'll be explaining them and illustrating them and talking about how I'm hoping they're going to benefit my young students this year. These areas are applicable to any teaching area at all, really, but seeing as I've been working on grammar books this year, we'll be relating this directly to grammar and grammar teaching. Now, I'm starting from the premise that everyone teaches primary classes or has taught primary classes or is maybe interested in teaching primary classes. That is probably a given, so I'm not going to dwell too long on that. What I'm interested in first is seeing how long people usually spend with their primary classes per week. And here's the first poll. You can answer the poll by clicking on the button below your name in the participant list. At the moment, it's got a little A on it. It's next to the hand. So, can you quickly answer that question? A, B, or C? A, 1 to 3 hours a week. B, up to 6 hours a week. Or C, some people do 7 or more hours a week. Let's just see what sort of situations people are teaching in. I'll give a little while for those answers to come in, and then I'll share them with you. I think I can put them on the screen. Okay, lovely, lots of answers coming in. Thank you. Just a little longer. And okay, I think now we've got most of the answers in, so I can, I hope, share those with you. Publish the responses. Here we go. Okay, as you can see, of those people who answered, the majority are like me. That's been my pattern of primary teaching over the last over the last 26 years. I'm now in my 27th year of working with young learners. 27th glorious year. And I have nearly always been teaching on that regime 1 to 3 hours a week, twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, but never more than 3 hours. Now, having worked on books for different areas around the world and in different countries and in different setups, I know that there are people who do quite a lot more. We can see that there are 27 people who teach between 4 and 6, and another 19 who are teaching 7 or more hours a week. This is interesting, especially for me, because it was something that was new to me. And it will be interesting, especially if when we go through this session and I show you some material, it might seem perhaps further on in the syllabus than you'd expect from primary students. It surprised me at first, but bear with me. Okay, now, as I said, I'm in Portugal. Here we are. That's me in Portugal. When I said I was slap in the middle, it's not quite right. You can see the red circle that's circling the beautiful town of Coimbra, and that's where I work. Let me just bring in another few pictures here which illustrate what a wonderful country Portugal is. Ah, look at that. There we go. These are some facets of the wonderful Portugal where I've been living for the last 26 years. Now, Portugal has been in the news recently, so maybe people have more of an idea about it. We are being systematically stomped on by the International Monetary Fund. Don't want to get too political here, but this is why Portugal has been maybe a bit more in the news than recently. So I wonder if you can give me some idea about how your country compares with Portugal. I'm going to start off with a little controversial example. Oh, here we go. Here's my comparative sentence. I'm comparing Portugal and the UK, and in my opinion, Portugal is friendlier than the UK. Not everyone will agree, I'm sure. If you need any more examples of proof than that, there we have the friendliest man in the world, José Mourinho. For those who follow football, will know that José Mourinho is everybody's favourite laugh-about clown. Actually, he's not. I think he's only smiled 3 times in the last 10 years. But in general, Portuguese people, very friendly. And now I'd like you to send me in the chat box a little comparison, making a comparison between your country or where you're teaching and Portugal, if you can. Send me something in the chat box. Here's your aim while you're doing this, or after you've done yours, and while you're watching others come in. What will you learn from what people say in the next minute? So I'll give a minute for ideas to come in. I want you to see what you learn from this. That's your task. Have a think, send me a comparison. We'll see what we come up with. I'll get back to you in just a moment. Okay. I've been trying to keep up with this this continually scrolling chat box, comparing places between where you are in Portugal. Thank you. I've been trying to get my head around all of this. The beaches in Portugal are better than in the UK. Well, that's obviously true. Portugal does have wonderful beaches. Thank you for that little compliment. Apparently it's also colder in Poland, and I can well believe that. It's beautiful and sunny here today, but a little chilly. And the Danube Delta is wilder than Portugal. That's fascinating. I'm inspired to go and visit it. So if you were able to keep up with this very rapidly changing chat box that was coming through, Portugal is beautiful. Yes, it is. Thank you. I learned some very interesting things there. That was my aim for sharing this information, and this is what can happen when we get a group of informed, experienced adults who have a wide range of travel and other knowledge. Opportunities come up spontaneously in the classroom for learning between students. And there's a vast range of what we can draw on from our adult students to help that happen. Now, this, of course, in the primary school classroom is not always the case, or is very rarely the case. The range and the breadth and the variety of experience amongst a group of 8-year-olds is generally not huge, let's be honest. And they all obviously have their own personalized perspective on things, but there's not much that we can share simply between students and encourage learning between peers. And this, I suppose, is what's influenced my approach to learning and teaching in the primary classroom over the last several years. If I was doing a presentation of comparatives, I would very probably start from something like the students as I have in the class with me. We very often line them up across the classroom, don't we? We put them in order from the tallest to the shortest. We put them in order from age, from the youngest to the oldest. We might even work on hair length, and you end up with a nice climb like this. Something that's very visual, something that works immediately in terms of comprehension of what you want to communicate. In course books, we very often have pictures of John, who has a big cat, and Jane, who has a small cat. And Jane has long hair, and John has short hair, and Jane is 8, and John is 9. Now, this is obviously, as I said, very immediate, and it's fun for the children, but at the same time, I'm worried that there isn't enough learning going on. We very often then go on, don't we, to the practice exercises, and we all know by now that, for example, cheetahs are faster than elephants, and let's say that crocodiles are more dangerous than, I don't know, ostriches. And a blue whale's tongue is bigger than an elephant. That was something that I did learn from a children's course book. But for the general run of things, working on simple visuals and ready-known knowledge, my question is, what are the children learning from this? It seems that people are having difficulty with the lighting in this room. I'm just looking at my bright sunny window and wondering how I can get more light. Not much I can do, I'm afraid. So I'm just going to have to carry on. So, yes, what are children learning? And if there's no new learning going on, then I'm worried that if new synapses are not firing and if new links are not being triggered in the brain, then there's nowhere for the new language to sit and settle and fix itself. So this is my first concern and something that I'm working on with my primary students at the moment, and especially in the area of grammar. Now let's talk about grammar just briefly. Any approach for a grammar class needs to have, oops, didn't want to go there yet, needs to have certain key aspects. It needs to make the language clear for students from the very beginning. They need to be absolutely sure what it means, or it leads to uncertainty, and uncertainty in a large group of primary students is something that we want to avoid because it will lead to then confusion and chaos. Not through the student's fault, but we must make sure that we're clear on what things mean. Meaning is very important. It doesn't mean exhaustive concept checking questions, but it does mean a clear concept to start with. We need to make sure that we don't go too deeply into grammatical analysis. We're working with children who have a wonderful ability to take things on a holistic level. They can take a chunk of language, recognize its meaning, and be ready to use it without knowing or needing to know what auxiliaries, verbs, prepositions, and other grammatical parts are involved. So to over-analyze language would be a mistake at this level and at this age. And the other thing it needs is to go into active, meaningful production quickly. There's not going to be a lot of patience with analysis. There's not going to be a lot of patience with copying things. If students have something new and exciting, they're going to want to use it. And so a fast route to production is going to be one of your best allies. Now, all of these aspects are embedded in the material I worked on this year. And there's also more, which I'll be sharing with you. So I'd like to have a look at some material from 3 books, in fact, I worked on this year. The material I'm showing you, not to be blowing my own trumpet, I didn't write. I co-wrote 2 books in a new Macmillan series. It's called Grammar Goals. It's a 6-level grammar supplementary series for primary age students. You can't rush out and buy it now. It's not coming out until next year. It's being published sometime in the middle of 2014. But it's been a long time in the building. I co-wrote levels 3 and 4 with my colleague Julie Tice, who is also in Portugal. She works in Lisbon, so it's a Portugal double act. Now, one of the things that happened at the beginning of the course was that Julie and I and the editor, Mary, all got together and we brainstormed extensively topic areas which could be used to stage the language and the themes for each new unit and each new area. And typically, there was me with my primary teaching style going, let's do monsters, let's do superheroes, let's do food fights and space stations, and I haven't grown up yet. And typically, the answer was coming back that my suggestions didn't include enough cross-curricular content. They were not bringing in other areas of the curriculum like history, like geography, like science, like mathematics, and this was going to be very much the push behind the series. And at the time I remember being a bit annoyed by this because I felt maybe that engagement and fun and really everything that was going to make a series attractive was maybe being drained away from this. But as I worked more on the series, and certainly as I wrote the teacher's book for one of the other books in the series, I really started to see that I was wrong in that. Let's have a quick look at the introduction to the material and the comparatives. This comes from level 3 of the book. Level 3 indicating that this will be the 3rd year approximately of English studies. And so the kids who started at 5 and 6 years old will now be somewhere between the ages of 7 and 9. This will be their first approach to the comparatives. Now, as you can see, there is a very clear cross-curricular slant to this material. This was written by Julie, my colleague. Geography is taking center stage. Really, at the moment, the language is secondary, and the facts about geography are what dominates this page. And here's my point about the learning. The important thing going on here is the learning, and that's creating a very solid and memorable base for the language then to sit in later. For children who are not living perhaps in Argentina or in Venezuela or in Brazil, then this will be new and exotic information. For many kids who are simply hardwired, well, kids are hardwired for learning, this will be something which will be quite exciting, this type of opportunity. More exciting, I hope, and more engaging than the fact that John has shorter hair than Jane, or that Jane's cat is bigger than John's, and especially when John and Jane don't exist. Now, taking a look at the follow-up materials, there are more chances to house the language in interesting concepts. Here, talking about the wonder and the massive dimensions of the world's oceans. We've all heard about the oceans, but kids at this age obviously may not have much of an idea about how they relate to each other. And so here's another learning opportunity. Moving on, we're not going to dwell too much on the actual specifics of the material, but I'm eager to show you what happens. Moving on, there'll be further opportunities to manipulate the language, a little more advanced this time, producing a little more about, again, something which to me is quite exotic, even though I have family who live in Australia. The wonders, the geographic and ecological wonders of Australia, to me, are fairly intrinsically motivating. And so yes, the language is an important part of the wider learning. It's made extremely clear with a very careful presentation. There is, on each new area, a grammar box which will make the language very clear. And there is also a succession of exercises which I hope will take their attention and guide them through successively more challenging and more productive exercises. I'm hoping that later, when they go home and their parents ask them what they learned, then I'm hoping that they will have something to tell their parents. Not that John is taller than Jane, but that the Patagonian desert is much colder than the Atacama Desert, or that the Iguazu Falls in Brazil are approximately 25 times wider than Angel Falls in Venezuela. I can see some comments coming through about the sound here. I've raised the volume of my microphone. I'm speaking as clearly as I can. I hope people can follow me. It seems to be okay for some people, but not for all. Thanks, Henry. Okay, I'll keep going. So yeah, here's an example of very clear cross-curricular content, encouraging students not only to learn new language, but in fact to embed that language in something new they're learning about the world. And so here we go, that's my first point, working backwards through the words of my title. Learn is my first important thing that I want to do with my students this year, to promote learning opportunities at every point. Housing language in new and interesting contexts. Context is all context. Language will have no function and no meaning if it's not clearly contextualized. Encouraging background learning, the sort of learning that goes away when the children actually move away from the book. They'll move away from the classroom. They'll have quieter moments for themselves. They might have quieter moments in the classroom as well, and they'll be encouraged to revisit this material. And it's at this quieter stage where they're thinking about what they've learned and then making choices. They may be completing sentences. They may be drawing a picture, but they're being encouraged to revisit the language and according to new neuroscientists, then this is what, at this stage, what happens is that language is being moved from short-term memory into long-term memory. And if you've got something very solid to grab it and move it, like an interesting context, then it's going to make it easier to grab and learn. Okay. So the last point on there being that, yes, they will not just walk away from the class feeling satisfied at having learned the comparatives. That's not intrinsically motivating. But I hope that they will walk away from the classroom satisfied, interested, with a sense of wonder that they've learned something new about the world, and this is how it's embedded. It's interesting to actually ask your students. I do this on key lessons. I give them a handout like this, and I ask them to tell me what they learned from this lesson. And the way we phrase it is, what's in your takeaway bag today? What are you taking away from this class? And all sorts of things come in this bag. Very often with young kids, they'll be doing pictures, pictorial representations of what they feel they've learned. If they've just done something like the geography lesson, they'll probably be pictures of waterfalls and deserts. A lot of children also obviously focus on the written word, and there'll be items of vocabulary, there'll be complete sentences, there'll be all sorts of things going into this bag, and it'll be coloured and made memorable, and there'll be things in here as well which were not part of your lesson plan at all, and that's also a fascinating way to see what the children are actually latching onto and taking away, and where their interests are. Now, I recommend trying that out. You'll get some real surprises. Now, here's a quote, moving on to a new area from a wonderful book which I read a few years ago. Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. Malcolm Gladwell, if you haven't read Malcolm Gladwell already, please run out and buy and read everything he's written. He's consistently fascinating. It's if you like, it's popular psychology. And he wrote a book called Outliers, which is all about success, and especially successful people. People like Bill Gates and the Beatles and David Beckham, and how these seemingly extraordinary people actually got to where they are today by very ordinary means. And the key word in the middle here is, of course, because I made it bold and bigger and underlined it, persistent. Absolutely key to any successful learning experience. This particular case that's mentioned here was a study that was done in Berkeley College, where they took a group of adults and encouraged them to try and understand a complex problem involving mathematics and computers, and most people just gave up immediately. Both had enough. A minute and a half was enough for them to decide they could not do it. Some people, even though they started from the same point of ignorance, if you like, kept going, and one person, as it mentioned, kept going for 22 minutes until they'd finally started to realize what the key to the problem was. And it's this persistence which will give students a head start in their learning. Gladwell talks about simply the value of time. The amount of exposure, which is where people who have more hours per week with their students have a big bonus, because the amount of exposure is directly related to successful learning outcomes. Now, we may think that this persistence in children is not typical, that young children are not, let's say, naturally insistent on trying to understand and trying to learn, but research is showing otherwise. There's research going on into young children and how they can be persistent learners, and it's showing that they have great resources of this. When we finish this talk, and later on this evening, I would very definitely encourage you to go and watch this talk on TED. Again, if you've never been to TED.com, go and enjoy. It's full of incredible and fascinating stuff. Hundreds and hundreds of videos on the most wide-ranging things. And this one is about child psychology. not just about babies, although the topic is what do babies think, but in the bottom right corner you can see there, I hope, a little boy who has been challenged to undergo an experiment. He is trying to figure out patterns that he can use with different coloured blocks to make a light light up, and he's managed it on the block that we can see on the right. There's a light glowing there, and he's still struggling with the block on the left. And what you'll see in this video is this 4-year-old boy making a series of hypotheses, which he then tests. He assesses the outcome, he re-hypothesizes, he tests again, and he keeps going at this. And the wonderful thing is he's also very talkative, and he shares what he's thinking with the audience, and it's very interesting to see. Children are, in fact, persistent little hypothesizing machines if we can catch their attention and make it worth their while. Now, obviously, we don't all have yellow blocks that light up and glow. We have course books and exercises and interaction to deal with, but they can also be very memorable. So we can encourage persistence. For some children, that encouragement will come through just the stimulus of learning something new. For some people, it will be the approval and the recognition of the teacher. Keep a teacher, it didn't fit on the same line. A lot of kids obviously need positive feedback, and of course positive feedback is very important. And some kids will need, as we well know, they'll need fun, they'll need movement, they'll need competition, they'll need something energetic that will keep them moving through the stages of persistence that we want. We can train kids to become more persistent, and if we do it early, it needs to be inculcated early. If we do it early, then we can start these good habits and put them into place and benefit them in all the learning they'll go through later. This is one of the things I think that Grammar Goals, the series I mentioned earlier, and we saw some material does well. They start from a bronze level exercise or page. They move through exercises at bronze level, which is mostly recognition and simple production. They'll move on to silver level, of course, which is more challenging, involves more production and more extension in their language. And finally, they'll come on to the gold level, where a whole block of stimuli and exercises later, they'll be challenged to reach the end of that block of learning and then assess how they've done. So what the series is saying basically is, okay, have a go at this. How did you do? Okay, that's interesting. Try again. This one's a little more difficult. Okay, good. Well done. I think we're getting there. But I need you to go a little further. Can you cope with this? Again, it's more challenging. We'll have some feedback in a moment, but first you need to think. And the whole setup is designed to encourage thoughtful and persistent study. Any one of the exercises, of course, can be taken out and made into a game. All of them can be included or skipped as you like, and you can tailor it to your classroom, but the potential for encouraging persistence is there. So here we go. That's summing up my second point, moving backwards through my title. We did learn. We're now on think. So we're just finishing off. And key areas of think being the chance for children to hypothesize, the chance for them to assess what they've done with the assistance of their peers and their classmates and the teacher, and then to persist and try again and reach a level that they feel they've achieved something real and satisfying. And this, I think, is going to greatly benefit students over the long term. Now, we're coming to the last point, moving backwards, as I said, through the title. And here, I'd like to illustrate a situation. Typical scene from a young learner classroom. Most of the children are smiling, so it can't be one of my classrooms. But but here we go. It's a typical interactive scene from a young learner classroom. I've got two questions for you. Can you shoot me through in the chat box your answers to these two questions? And we'll see if we agree on what's going on here. What do you think has just happened in this classroom? And what do you think will most probably happen next? Any ideas? Put them in the chat box. We'll see if we agree. I like that. They've just had an aha moment. Isn't that nice? But broadly, yes, we agree. It's a very familiar situation. It's a situation that I love to see in my classroom. Keen participation from a range of students. It is most probable, that we don't know, but it's most probable that yes, the teacher has just asked a question. It's a question which seems to be within the students' capabilities because there's a forest of hands going up and people are keen to participate. What will happen next? Well, yes, as people said, most probably the teacher will nominate one of the students to answer. The teacher might ask all the students to shout out the answer at the same time and get a little energy and liveliness into the classroom. And of course, this is a very familiar, comfortable situation, happens again and again and again. It's a form of mini-testing, it's a form of checking, and it's very useful to us. I'd like to focus in, though, on one kid from this picture that I'm particularly interested in. So here we are. Look at that girl in the middle. She's incredibly focused. She looks very determined. She looks confident. I bet she's bright. She gets good marks, doesn't she? Always participates well. But in fact, it's not her that I'm interested in. The one, in fact, that I'm interested in is this kid. What's he doing? I presume he's thinking. Now, what's he thinking about? We have no idea. There's suggestions coming in. He may be lost. He may be lost through his own personal choice. He may be thinking about the fact that he's got sports next and he likes sports. He may be thinking about the book that he read last night. He may even be thinking about the teacher's question. And you know what? He may even know the answer, even though he looks a bit lost. He may have heard the answer. He may have thought about it, but he hasn't got his hand in the air and he doesn't look keen to answer. And he's one of the kids I'm interested in. I'm presuming that to be kind to him and to make my situation easier, it's not the fact that he's bored or lost or not interested or that he doesn't like the teacher. He's thinking, and he's a quiet boy, and he's the one, or one of the ones that I'm interested in focusing on now. He is an introvert, in my view. That's how I like to imagine him. He's not one of the kids who is immediately with their hand like, ooh, ooh, pick me, pick me. He's not one of the get up and go and shout it out and see if everyone agrees type students. He's one of the ones who wants to think. He wants to be sure. He wants to consider. And he wants his quiet time before he's going to contribute. And there are lots and lots of these children in our classrooms. Now, I read, again, another book just recently. Here is the cover and the author of a very wonderful book, which I highly recommend. It's not particularly about education, although it does have a section focusing on education. It's all about introverts, and as Susan Cain said in her book, Quiet, how do introverts cope in a world that can't stop talking? It's a very interesting book, as someone has just commented, and gives a great insight into what's going on in the minds of the 40, maybe 50% of our students who feel this way. No stigma, of course, attached to the word introvert. No stigma attached to the word shy. Just recently I was editing an exercise in a book, and I thought that shy was in the negative column of adjectives, and I protested. Although you may not get this idea at the moment, I am a shy person. It's true. Outside the classroom, outside the webinar frame, I am actually a very quiet and introverted person. I like listening. I'm not very often a ready contributor. And I think this is one that's very interesting to explore with our students. So I want to give the students more time to think. I want them to have time to be sure about their answers and not to be swept aside by the keen, participative, lovely extrovert students who are perhaps dominating the classroom at the moment. I also want the extrovert students to practice the very valuable skill of stopping, thinking, and giving people space. Because the world isn't set up that way in most situations. What's valued in many situations is the immediate, especially in the Western world, it's the immediate, enthusiastic, loud response. But that's not the way that everyone works. So I'm encouraging my students this year to get used to the fact that when I ask a question, I don't want hands up immediately. I don't even want an answer, I want them to think. And I'm getting my students into the habit of dealing with extended series of questions. Just recently I've got an elementary class. They're not primary school students, they're 10 and 11, so they're just out of what I would call primary, although still in what is referred to as primary in some countries. And we've been doing a revision of CAN for ability, and we had an animal quiz. And rather than each question being followed by an immediate answer, they had a string of questions which I asked them to think about and keep thinking about. As more questions came on, they were asked to think again, and as the round finished, they were told they would then have the opportunity to share. Not with me, with their colleagues. And I think that's important as well. To move on to sharing in a peer situation and taking away the immediate outpouring of spontaneous answers. So we had questions like, can elephants swim? Can elephants jump? Can crocodiles run? How many legs have insects got? How many legs have spiders got? Can spiders jump? Can frogs fly? I'm going faster than I did in my primary or in my elementary classroom, just because I'm running out of time. But time was available for students to take on board each new question, and there was thinking time because there was not immediate feedback. Then, when we revisited the questions, they shared their answers with each other. So it wasn't a situation where students dominated the class, it was a situation where students shared their knowledge amongst a group of people. This is what I want to encourage as my final aim for my students this year. The time to stop and think. Time for thinking, time for reflection. Activities that are more extended in the challenge and in the task. And that do not have immediate feedback. It ties in, and that create more independence in the way that children approach material. Each child not only has the opportunity, but more has the obligation to think things through quite carefully. It ties in very nicely with the idea of persistence. It ties in very nicely with the idea of extended learning and language fitting into a bigger and more engaging context. So, those are the three things. We move backwards through the title that I want to concentrate on this year. As I'm working through grammar, I'm looking to give it a very clear context and help children learn something new that will consolidate it. I'm looking to give students the chance to think carefully and approach the question again and again and work their way through in a persistent manner to get to the solution. And I'm hoping to give this space of quiet to encourage quiet ones to have time and the louder ones to have more reflection in their approach. So I might say that for many, many years, I mean 20 or more years, my classroom might have been called the whiz-bang-pow classroom because it was very lively and it was up and moving and it was quite a frenetic classroom. And I enjoyed it for many years, and I'm sure my students benefited from the energy. There was quiet time as well. But more and more, maybe as I'm getting older, I don't know, I'm hoping to move away from the whiz-bang-pow approach and move on to what I'm calling for the moment the stop, think, and learn approach. I'm having fun, and I can see it working with my students, and I think they're getting two benefits from it. They're getting more patient, and I really think they're just getting smarter. I'd recommend that you have a go yourself. There we are. Stop, think, and learn. Thank you. Now, there may be questions. I haven't left much time for questions. That was not intentional. If anyone has something they'd like to fire through to me in the chat box, I will see if I can answer. I noticed there were questions coming up before, but I'm very bad at multitasking. I didn't have the presence of mind to answer. Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for your comments. That's lovely to read. It's a bit strange being here all my own, but to have those comments is great. Thank you. Hey, someone who stopped and thought and learned. Excellent. Nice to see that. Reflection is necessary to digest the grammar. Absolutely. Absolutely. I never know what to call it. A colleague of mine, Lisbel, or two colleagues, Lisbel and Paula Zanagi, who work in Lisbon, called it background learning. But it's basically reflection, you're right. It's the chance not to be pushed, the chance to have some quiet time, the chance to complete something which suggests the language, but doesn't necessarily force the language, the chance to make choices, the chance to categorize things, the chance to let things settle in the brain. Not all the way down to your shoulders probably, but somewhere up here. And it is a very necessary part of learning, reflection, absolutely. Oh, that's a good question. Do you stop, think, and learn in some specific order? No. It really depends on the pattern of what we're doing in class. Stop is something that my students are used to hearing me say now in a positive way. Okay, everybody, let's stop. And it might come at any stage. It might come at a presentation stage. It might come at a practice stage. It might come before a brainstorm, especially before a brainstorm. Learning, I hope, will come at every stage of the lesson. And thinking also, because part of the thinking is persistence, I hope it's going to be spread over, again, a range of activities. Oh, there's Nate. Hi, Nate. Sorry, it's a friend of mine. Hi, Nate. The fourth point in the stop section asks Jeanne, and let me just scroll back to that. It said, if we ask students to stop and think, I believe it will lead to more independence and greater autonomy among students. I think that's beyond doubt. No, I've just overrun my time. I don't know, Henry, if you'd like to come in here, or if I have a minute or two more to pick out a couple of questions. I can see there are some more.
No, feel free to pick out a few more questions, because I can see there's lots coming in. So if you want to choose some that you think were building on, then feel free.
Okay, yeah, there are lots and lots coming in. It's going to be difficult to choose, so I'm just going to have to sort of do a quick whiz and stop. And someone asked a question about using the native language. There are certain points. This is my advantage of having lived 26 years in the same country, Portugal. I can now make very judicious use of a student's native language. And when I'm explaining something which for the first time is an extended task and is new for them, they are simply not used to being asked a series of questions and not giving the answers. Bit strange. So I do take advantage of L1 to do that. When I'm explaining their takeaway bag, which I showed you earlier on, for the first time, I'll use a bit of their own native language to explain that. But generally, all of this, I think, can be done on the basis of the target language, especially, of course, when they're getting to this stage and they have a fair amount of language to play with. And let me see. The takeaway bag, a question from Christina. Sorry, that was a Portuguese pronunciation. Christina. The takeaway bag is simply something that I give to the students at the end of the lesson and ask them, what did you learn today? What's in your takeaway bag? And it's very interesting to see whether they think they learned items of vocabulary, very often true. If they learned complete phrases, or quite often true also. But they also are fascinated by facts and figures. Children, as we know, love extremes, and if they're given something of an extreme nature, like the biggest, the best, the fastest, the tallest to latch onto, that is something that they love to take away with them. And they'll draw pictures of it, and they might write sentences about it, and you realize that it wasn't actually something that was part of your learning aims for your lesson, but it's something which meant a lot to them. And that, I think, is fascinating, and we can follow that when we need to. Henry, right, I think probably I need to shut up. So maybe I can hand back to you. No animal impressions. Sorry about that, Henry. I know you were looking forward to them, but I didn't find a place for the animal.
I'm disappointed. No, it's fine. It's fine, Dave. I haven't done any yet either. No, there's a time and a place for that.
You're on screen.
Thank you for a brilliant talk.
You're welcome.
There's lots more positive feedback coming. Thank you. Oh, yeah, here I am.
Pleased to see you.
Thanks to all the audience as well for your contributions today.
Henry seems to have frozen, but I'm still here. I wonder if there's a technical hitch. Henry has now left. It's me. Hello, it's me. So, okay, I'll round off by saying thank you everyone very much. More than 500 people who were here. I feel privileged. Thank you for joining me. I enjoyed sharing some of my ideas with you. I very much hope that you enjoy experimenting in the classroom, trying some of these out, and seeing how your students react. I love my thoughtful classroom, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. Thank you very much.
Hi there, can anybody hear me? Yes, hi everybody. This is Caroline. I'm just stepping in at the last minute for Henry. He's just having a couple of technical hitches. Henry will be back with us very shortly and we'll be introducing our next talk. In the meantime, go and get yourself a cup of tea. Thanks very much today for a brilliant session there. And we'll be with you very shortly, I promise.
Do I have my PowerPoint? For joining us, and also thank you for being so patient with all the technical hitches and everything. As you can see, the talk is called Engaging Listening and Speaking Activities for Primary Students. Now I know that, that in primary we've got a whole range of levels, ages. I mean, the difference between a 6-year-old and a 12-year-old is very different. So what I've tried to do is put some activities together that that you can actually modify to different levels. There are some very simple activities. Many of them you may know, but maybe there's a slight twist to them. So I hope that you all go away with something. Okay, so that's enough of the preamble. Let's move on to the first activity. Now, your typical, I'm going to show you some flashcards. Okay, so now this is a typical presentation. Okay, so can you see these flashcards? Okay. Okay, we've got book. Now I want to, before I start, obviously this is a speaking and listening session. So I understand that you're all in different places, in different spaces. But I'd like this session to be as interactive as possible. So sometimes I'll ask you to give an answer, which of course you'll have to do with chat. Sometimes there might be a little bit of repetition, a bit of pronunciation practice, which you'll have to do in your own space, as long as you don't embarrass yourself in front of a lot of other people. And so anyway, that's the starting point. So first of all, we're going to start off with a quick vocabulary presentation. Repeat after me. Book, book, book. Crayon, crayon, crayon. Rubber, rubber, rubber. Okay, now that is very, very exciting. Not. Okay, so imagine you've got a large class of students and half of them might be with their heads on their hands and just repeating after you, not even needing to look at the flashcards. So, so one of the things that, that you need to do is make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, so let's do it this way. Okay, just very quickly. What is it? What is it? Excellent. Okay, we'll do another one. What is it? What is it? Okay, it's a rubber. Okay. Another way, just makes it slightly more interesting to flip the cards and things. And also a great thing about it is that you can invite your students to be involved in that. You can invite them up to be the ones flipping the cards. Another way you might do it is like this. A sly swish like that, which they quite enjoy doing as well. And another way you might do it is slowly revealing cards like that. Okay, so we're not talking just about vocabulary though, so I'm going to put those cards away for the moment. Moving on to the next slide. Oh dear. Oh yes, here we go. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do now is, again, we've got the same vocabulary here. We've got book, crayon, and rubber. So you are, imagine, new to learning English, and these are the 3 words you've learned. Okay? Now I want you to imagine that you have somebody sitting next to you who has been in the same class and has learnt these 3 words as well. So that's all the English you know. Now, think of your imaginary friend, boy or girl, how old, what's their name? Okay, and now, with these 3 words, have a conversation with your friend. Pretty impossible, okay? It's like, book, yes, crayon, crayon, etc. You can't have a conversation like that. And one of the problems that we often, one of the things that often happens with the very young end of primary is that that we just teach them vocabulary without actually giving them a context in which they can use it. So, so I'm just getting comfortable here. One of the things that you can do is introduce the vocabulary within a short structure. So instead of saying, just showing them and going book, 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 what is it? And encourage, it's a book. Okay, different vocabulary, of course, will require a different simple structure. But for example, with "it's a book," you know, how many syllables in "it's a book"? I actually can't see. Okay, all right. And how many syllables? So how many syllables in "butterfly"? The same number of syllables. Okay. So the same with "it's a crayon." You know, that's 4 syllables. How many syllables in "caterpillar"? You know, that's 4 syllables as well. So you can play a little bit with the pronunciation. I mean, like, you know, I do a lot of chants with very young children, and they really enjoy it. So you do things like it's a book. It's a book. Very, very simple things like that. And you can just make them up on the spur of the moment. And the children really love sort of like stamping and clapping. But you're getting them to use a whole structure. And then, of course, like I said before, you can also include your children in presenting the language. So so they'll also have practice with, you know, from the very, you know, maybe the second lesson. Invite a more confident child to the front of the class and help them with the "what is it" as they're holding the flashcards. And then, you know, you've then got a question and answer, which the children can practice. You know, you do fun drilling, just chanting and stuff, okay? So we're going to move on a little bit further. So this time, I'm going to introduce more vocabulary. So we've got book, crayon, and rubber. Well, we've got "it's a book," "it's a crayon," "it's a rubber." And as they're revealed, you don't have to type this. As they're revealed, just in your head or out loud, if you're in private, say the vocabulary, okay? So if I can get it moving. Okay, it's a bag, it's a pencil case, and the rest of them, it's a pencil, it's a ruler, and it's a pencil sharpener. Now, the next thing is, right, I'm going to give you another thing that children really, really enjoy doing is guessing. So what I'd like you to do now is you have 10 seconds to memorize the items of vocabulary on the screen. And then we're going to look at them one more time. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. All right. What's missing? All right. It's a bag. It's a crayon. It's a book. It's a pencil. It's a rubber. It's a pencil sharpener. It's a ruler. What is it? Yay! Excellent. Those people who said pencil case. Well done. Oh dear. Okay. Now, so of course, you know, it's obvious you know what all the vocabulary is. Now, if you want your students to produce a little bit, you know, different language, slightly different language, a really good way of doing this is playing an activity, similar activity, just a tweak. Disappearing cards, okay? So this time, the pencil case, we've guessed, so it's removed from the activity. So here we go. We're going to chant the language again, okay, the words again. So it's a pencil. Oh! It's a pencil, it's a rubber, it's a bag, it's a sharpener, it's a ruler, it's a book. What is it? Can't see anybody's answer. Aye, yes, all of those who said crayon, excellent, well done. Okay, so it's a crayon. Let's try it one more time. So we're losing 2 items of vocabulary now. So here we go. It's a book. Uh-oh, my slides are going funny. Okay, it's a book. Oh. It's a bag, it's a pencil, it's a ruler, it's a sharpener. What is it? Excellent. It is. It's a rubber. But the thing is now, you're all adults, I presume. You're all adults doing this. But the fact that you're removing some of the vocabulary, it creates a little bit of a doubt in the children's minds. So doing an activity like this, you actually create a need for a question. So because of that doubting question, is it a rubber? So one of the really important things, obviously, you know, when you're teaching a language, English or whatever language, it's important to create a context in which there's a need for the language rather than just say this now and there's no real understanding of it. Okay, so creating a need is really important. Now, moving on from that, if I can get my slides to work. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So you also need to create a need to listen. Okay, so one moment. Okay, so I don't know. I mean, sometimes, you know, especially in large classes, sometimes, you know, you'll say to the children, okay, now listen to the song, and you play the music, and you've got like 4 or 5 children in the class who are just like, you know, no attention being paid whatsoever. And when you're using a song that, well, this one at the moment we've got text here, but for example, what is the let's look, what is the core vocabulary in this song? Can you see what's the core vocabulary in this song? Okay, body parts, that's right. Okay, all right. So, so a very simple activity, and you can adapt this to any kind of song, is to, if you've got flashcards, get children to hold up flashcards when they hear the words. One of the things that my children really, really enjoy is actions. So, for example, in your own private space, how would you action, or how would you mime body in your own private space? You don't have to write anything. Okay, so maybe like that. How would you mime claws? So maybe like this. Yep. Okay. In fact, when my students sing this song, they actually have resurrected Michael Jackson. A bit of Thriller going on there. Okay. So now, another activity that you can do with this sort of thing, and I mean, and this is something that my students absolutely love, is pausing the soundtrack and for them to say what the next word is. Now, unfortunately, on this platform, I can't show you any video and I can't play any soundtrack, so I'm going to have to sing, so be kind, okay? So, all right, so what I'm going to do is sing, and then when I stop, you tell me what the next word is, okay? All right. One moment. All right. A giant body and scary. Anybody get it? Yay. Let's sing about. Okay. Has it got a? Yes, it. Okay, all right, I'm stopping now. Okay, but you get the idea. And one of the great things about that is that that you can actually pause the soundtrack, whether you use an interactive whiteboard or you use a CD player or whatever. You can actually pause the soundtrack at certain moments to help students notice language. For example, I mean, we had the body parts there, so I stopped at claws and, well, dinosaurs. Has it got a tail? And then I paused after yes, it, to highlight the verb at the end that's the same as the verb at the beginning of the question. Now, similarly, you can do similar things with, like, for stories as well. Stories are amazing. The kids love them, but the same principle applies. You can pause. You know, again, it's again getting the children to focus on the story. You know, they listen to the story. Maybe you use story cards, and then when they look at it in their book, it's a way of getting them to listen to the soundtrack whilst they're reading and helping them to notice language. Okay, so for example, in this case, look, I'm wearing a red. Yeah, absolutely. Me too. What are we? Okay, so you can get, again, you can do the same thing. Also, and an activity that my children love as well is listening out for, you know, obviously you won't be able to do this with a soundtrack, but you might do it just you or inviting other children in the class to come up and participate, giving them a bit of a script. But for example, making mistakes. So here we go. So we're at an activity camp and there's a competition. We're the blue team. What's the mistake? Excellent. Okay, so if I just move on now, something. One moment. Okay. Right, the mouse master. Now, something that I love doing, well, my kids, forget what I love doing. Something that my kids love doing in class, they love taking responsibility. And that particular activity, pausing the soundtrack, is something that they absolutely love doing. And the person who pauses the soundtrack, so I have rotas for different responsibility roles in the class. And I give them, one moment, I'm all trapped. Give them, they get a lanyard, you know, these things that you get at conferences or your mobile phone, and a little thing to wear around their neck. But I have to have a rota because otherwise I get into terrible trouble and children get upset. But there are lots of different roles. But the mouse master is the one who is in charge of pausing the song or pausing the soundtrack in the story. And what I found as well is as the children get more confident, they actually, it's not that they overtly understand the grammar per se, but they're getting more of an instinct for it, because you find that as the year goes on, the children actually pause at a more pertinent moment, whether it's just before the noun or whether it's before the auxiliary verb. They actually get really, really good at it. Okay, so thanks, it's solved my problem. Oh, okay, right, okay. Okay, next. So going back to focusing on dialogue and things, or noticing, or extending speaking activities. Now, this is a typical dialogue that you might find in a primary book. And you'll notice that you can do this in many different ways, but to separate the different parts of the dialogue. But here you notice that on the left-hand side there's blue, and on the right-hand side there's purple. So what I would do, getting the children to do the dialogue, I would divide the class in half, and one side of the class would be blue and the other side of the class would be purple, and then they would read the dialogue together. Obviously, you'd have to work on pronunciation and things as well, but I mean, you'd have done that a long time before you do the dialogue. When you're introducing the structures and stuff, you would have done quite a lot of pronunciation. Okay, so then you get one side of the class to do blue, one side to do purple, and then they swap. And then one side does purple, the other side does blue. And then what you would do is get somebody from one side of the class and somebody from the other side of the class to actually do it in a pair, just to establish what you want your students to do next, and then you divide your class into pairs. And what about large classes? No, but this is what I'm saying, is with large classes you can divide them into half and half, and then to break it down. There'll be a lot of noise, but at least it's an opportunity for them to try and speak. Okay, and then what you can do as well with something typical like something like this is also highlight. Now I know I've got, here we go. You can highlight different parts of, I'm supposed to be highlighting here. One moment. It's not working. Sorry, I can't work the facility. But for example, you can get the children, if you notice, can I have some bread, please? Highlight the different vocabulary that they can change within the dialogue, so that they can then try and make it their own. Oh, there you go. It went in completely the wrong place. Okay, so so that's another sort of dialogue speaking activity. Another activity that works really, really well, and I touched on this in when I was talking about the story, is I'm getting a lot of pings. Okay. A lot of course books now have smaller text for students to read, and an activity that they absolutely love, small classes, big classes, medium-sized classes, whatever, is this game where you make mistakes during the course of reading. And again, it means that they have a need to listen to you. Okay, so for example, in this case, I'm going to read the text about Peggy Whitson, who was an astronaut. Okay, so this is Peggy Whitson. She's a doctor. Okay, and what your students would do would say, stop, and they would correct your error. Okay, so, and then you would continue, astronauts train for 10 months. Stop, they train for 20 months and study maths and biology. Okay, so simple things like that. Now what I would usually do is make about 5 errors in a text, and you'll notice that there are a couple of other texts there that the students can then manipulate. So you get, maybe you get students working in pairs or small groups to manipulate one text, or if your students are used to this kind of activity and have more confidence, you can get them to work in pairs, one person doing one text and one person doing another text. And it's something that they really enjoy. And again, like with, as with the pausing the soundtrack, they become better and better at picking out the function of words, understanding the function of words. They will replace an adjective with an adjective, a noun with a noun, a verb with a verb, and it's just sort of, rather than laboring the terminology of grammar, they will actually, it's the instinct more than anything else. Another thing that you can do with text like this, and it's something that I find works really well with children who are sort of like 9, 10, 11, that age group, is to work on pronunciation, believe it or not, from a reading text. So for example, if we look at the text about the sports journalist, about Saba Carbonero, if you introduce the idea of catenation, okay, so catenation being, for example, it's not Sara Carbonero is a sports journalist. For example, is a sports journalist, you've got is finishing in a consonant, and a being a vowel, and then the following word starting with a consonant. We don't break it up, and I live in Spain, so I mean this is particularly a problem in Spain because Spanish is a syllable-timed language, whereas English is a stress-timed language, and there is this tendency to sort of chop up each word separately. Whereas doing an activity like this, you get children to recognize where words connect, run into each other, and I usually get well, you have to introduce the idea first of all, of course, but then once they've got the idea, you can then, I encourage them to do little loops between, where they think there should be catenation, to do little loops. And then they read the text, and they read it so much better. And they also really surprise themselves at how much more fluent they sound. Okay, all right, people are having problems seeing the slides. Okay, all right, I'm going to move on from that. Okay, question teacher. Again, like I said, I have my little lanyards with things. And here's another one, question teacher. That's another role that I give students. And they really love it. I think it's really important. Okay, I see that, Henry, okay. It's really important that sometimes you find that like very basic structures, like for example, personal information structures such as, what's your name, how old are you, that kind of thing, are kind of like left behind or forgotten while we're struggling with new structures that are part of the course. And routine, I think, is very, very important. And a really useful routine at the beginning of any lesson is to recycle all this language. Okay, so the question teacher is a role. And at the beginning of a lesson, a simple routine would be to revise, to revise different structures. So for example, in this case, what do you think this question might be? Okay, it's what's your name? All right, I can see. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, excellent. Okay, so it's what's your name? Now, I don't need, I'm an English teacher. I have a high level of English, been speaking it all my life. I don't need practice. And there are certain roles that you can hand over, like the mouse master, which required no language, well, an understanding of the language. But the question teacher role can be handed over to a student. So what you can do is, again, having a rota so you don't get into trouble or upset anybody, you can have a series of questions on the board. Now, I usually put about 5 for recycling different either personal information questions or structures that we've kind of moved on from, but just to remind them. And you can get a student to be the question teacher. They wear their little lanyard, okay, and come up to the front of the class and ask, what's this question? And nominate somebody in the class to answer it, and then ask, and the answer. and somebody else might answer it. Okay, so and it's just a little role. It requires a little bit of language, but it makes that student feel important. And sometimes the class actually responds better to a student teaching them than to you teaching them. Also, it's really important as well when you do something like this is to keep working on the pronunciation. Now in Spain, the typical way that this would be said, this question would be, "What's your name?" Okay, and so of course you have to work on that because the "your" is actually a weak sound in the question. So you would do something like, I do a lot of chanting. So everybody in your own private space, repeat after me. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Your name. Your name. What's your name? Okay? And then what's your name? And you'll find that their pronunciation is so much better. And then what would be a response to this? What's the answer? Okay. Now, my name is the correct answer, but I tend to, well, I'm a native English speaker, and my name is, I very rarely use. I might, if I'm making a formal phone call, for example, to a hotel or to a company or something like that, I would be hello, my name is. But generally, you'd say just your name, or you'd say I'm, because if you think about it, the only way that you can finish the sentence, my name is one way. Whereas if you say I'm, it can be finished many, many ways. It's, I'm Roisin, I'm Irish, I'm 21, I'm a liar. Okay, all right. So different. So I think think about your answers. I'm goes a long, long way. Okay, and other questions you might do, for example, in this case, old. This one is, what question is this? Excellent, excellent. Okay, and the next one is this one. Okay, we're on where do you live? Okay, again, I mean, this is another sentence that. Or question that in Spain particularly, because of this problem with staccato chopping of the words, you might get where do you live? Okay, which is quite it's understandable, but a really high frequency chunk in English is do you, and again this is something that you can work on. Do where do you live? Where do you live? Okay, and you just have fun with it. Do, and your children will move around and like get into the chant, but you're reminding them that it's not do you, it's do. And the same, and it's so important as well because things like, for example, very typical things, do you like? What animal do you like? Where do you live? Oh no, we've done where do you live, but what animal do you like, etc. It crops up so much that it's something worth isolating and working with because it makes a huge difference to pronunciation. Okay, and then we've got this question. Now, what do you think this one might be? Yeah, okay, so it's what X do you like, for example, what food do you like, what fruit do you like, yes, well done. So, yeah, and then this one here would start off, it would be a yes-no question. So do you like bananas? Do you like apples? Now, I introduced these, let me show you another example. It's like the like is playing with the whole like question. You've got the open question and the yes-no question. Similarly, something like this, what X can you, for example, it could be what sport can you do or can you play tennis? Again, you would introduce the prompts in context. So at the time that you're actually studying the language, then later on you can use different prompts, the same prompts to remind students of that structure that they've practiced. Now this is what I do. I make little cards like this because if you were to turn around and write it on the board every day, it would take for ages. Whereas I make little cards like this with my prompts on. And the pile increases during the course of the year. And then I keep it together in a crocodile clip, one of these because it can't be a paper clip because you get a big pile. And then I just stick it on the wall next to the blackboard or the whiteboard, and it's there immediately accessible. And you get to revise not just personal information questions, but also all the structures that the students have been studying. Okay, now I'm going to have to move on because I think we're going to run out of time. Okay. Oh yes, right. Okay. When you're doing something like this, I mean, you can get children to mingle around. I mean, if you've got large classes, it's more difficult. So one of the things that you can do with them is just add a novelty factor. So I mean, one of the things that I do with my students is to get them to talk on their mobile phones, to have their to do their questions and answers on a mobile phone. And here's a photograph of some of the little children doing that. You know, of course, they wouldn't be asking you about what they did yesterday, but what's your name and what food you like, what animals you like, etc. Okay, moving on then. Oh, I can't move the slide. 1 second. Okay, another way that you can get your students to keep practicing, with questions and answers and stuff through the year is just to keep recycling the language, because if they only have like 3 or 4 hours of English or even 2 hours of English a week, unless there's a constant recycling of things, it's forgotten. Okay, so question flip cards. Can you see these? Okay. So what I do is make type out a whole series of questions that are relevant to the level, and then just chop them up and make sure that the beginning of the sentences or the questions are towards the middle of the page, and it leaves you space to put an elastic band on. And then your students just flip through and ask random questions to each other. And it's a great way to practice. And it's a really good thing to do as well when you've got, mixed ability classes, and you set up activities, and some students finish before others, and it's just something to give them to do as well, so that they're kept busy and that they're kept working. Okay, so that's question flip cards. Now, oops. Okay, questionnaires, of course. I mean, this is very common. Questionnaires are really, really common, and you can use them for anything. Here you have one of the yes/no questions. Do you like chicken? Do you like pizza? Do you like bananas? Do you like English? Do you like Sevilla? Do you like Betis? In Seville, where I live in Spain, Sevilla and Betis are opposing football teams, and people feel very passionate about them. So it often causes much laughter and growling when people admit their allegiance to one team or another. Then, of course, you can move on to open questions where a little bit more writing is required. But what I like to do with something like this is to leave a bit of space at the bottom so that the students can actually personalize their questions as well, give them a bit of space to personalize. And then this version is for the children who can't read and write. Younger students. So like here's a couple of 5-year-olds doing a questionnaire, but they're just asking each other about their likes and dislikes and having a thoroughly good time and feeling very grown up. Okay? Moving on again. Here we go. Oops. Okay. All right. Classroom language. Now, as I've said, I try to get my students involved as much as possible with activities, running activities in the class, because different activities. If they lead different activities, each activity will present its own natural language. So and also I think it's very important to look ahead in your course, like look further ahead in the year and see what language is coming up, and you can incorporate that into your classroom language, which they're going to be exposed to every lesson. And by the time you get to it, say for example 3 or 4 months down the line, they'll be very, very familiar with it. It's like exposing to the language to language as you would as happens when they're learning their first language. So for example, if you have an 8-unit course, and towards, say for example in Unit 6, your student, the target language is going to be what do you want to eat? I want to eat spaghetti. I don't want to eat sausages. that kind of language? Well, at the very beginning of the year, in a democratic classroom, once your students have learned a couple of songs, your teacher's helper could start the lesson as part of your routine at the beginning of the lesson. Your students could select, or at the end of the lesson, in fact, vote about which song they want to sing, and your teacher's helper might ask, what song do you want to sing? At the beginning of the year, they'd need a lot of prompting, and your class can then say, I want to sing whatever song, a choice of two. What you do with larger classes is get them in groups to decide in the group which song they'd want to sing, so you're not spending all day trying to find out what's the popular song. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing is that, think carefully about the language you do introduce, because the polite way to ask for a pencil is to say, may I borrow a pencil? Okay, oops, pressing the wrong button. But I find that can I have a pencil is it's a piece of language, classroom language, that has a lot more mileage. So for example, you might have your students saying, can I have a pencil, please? Can I have a rubber, please? Etc., etc. But then, for example, you might play a game with them that involves mini flashcards. So, for example, mini flashcards about food. Now, a game that I get my students to do in pairs, you have to, especially with large classes, you have to set up these things really, really carefully, but they're fun, and the students really enjoy trying to guess what food their partner has. So if you look at the instructions, so first of all, your children work in pairs, and each child has their own set of mini flashcards. So you can see there are 8, okay? And then each child chooses 4 cards and puts the rest to the side, and then the pair takes it in turns to try and guess, which cards their partner is holding by asking, can I have carrots, please? Okay? So if you guess correctly, the person will say, yes, here you are, and thank you. And if it's not correct, no, sorry, and then the other person has a go to guess. So the idea is to guess the 4 cards that your partner has, and they really love that kind of thing. And of course, it lends itself nicely to later on doing a bit of role play. So here you have, this is a small class because it's easier to get parental permission for photos. But in a larger class, you can do, for example, get a photocopy of, for coloring, a plate, knife, fork, and spoon. And then at the end of the activity, they can play it in smaller groups. And at the end of the activity, they can then color in, draw and color the food that they've chosen. Okay, right. Next. Flag speaking opportunities. Now this, it's all very well saying to your students, okay, speak English, please. For example, if you want them to correct homework together, you can say, okay, this is a speaking activity. But if you don't actually give them the tools to do the activity properly, you probably get them all speaking in L1, in their first language, or they might resort to number 1, C. To F, that kind of thing, or you just might have silence. Okay, so what you can do instead is highlight language that they could be using. So something that I do with like 9, 10-year-olds is we do sharing ideas thing. So you've got the typical things that, for example, if your students eventually are going to be doing external exams where they're required to have an oral discussion with someone, agreeing and disagreeing, etc. This is you can start using that language very early on. Okay, so we do with my students, we do things like, one moment. Okay, the typical, giving an opinion. So I think that number one is F. In my opinion, number 1 is G. And then agreeing and disagreeing, simple agreeing and disagreeing. Now this is quite dry. But they do really enjoy it when you introduce alternative language, like I think that number 1 is A, and I am never wrong. Okay, and then of course agreeing and disagreeing, like agreeing like give me 5 and no way, Jose. Okay, and they love that kind of thing. You can they're more likely to do that kind of speaking activity if you say, okay, this is a speaking activity. You've given them the tools so that they can do it, and then you encourage at the moment of doing it. Say, you know, what kind of language are you going to use? To remind them of the language that they know, and during the course of the year, you can gradually build it up. You know, gradually they'll have more and more things that they can say. Okay, and then last thing. And I'm almost on time. Okay, last thing is Jeopardy. I'm sure you all know this game. It's a TV program of years and years back, and it's a really good way of getting. It's an engaging way of getting students to think of questions and, you know, get more speaking going on. So in Jeopardy, of course, the idea is that you give an answer, and the students tell you what the question is. Okay, so it's an alternative, you know, the opposite way to giving a question and they tell you the answer. So, so for example, let's have some questions. No, some answers. Okay, so what's the question? I'm Roisin. Excellent. Who are you? What's your name? Both valid. Okay, what about this one? I live in Spain. Excellent. Okay, where do you live? I had pizza last night. Still on, where do you live? Okay, I had pizza last night. You might have something that, you know, what did you eat last night? Yep, absolutely. What did you have for dinner? Okay. What about this one? You know, if you've got higher level primary students, I would buy an enormous house and go on lots of holidays. A lot of you replying. What would you do if you won the lottery? Yeah, okay, all right. And then the last one, just this is a personal one. Yes, this has been a very interesting experience. Okay, I'm looking at all your chats here. Okay. Loads of you answering, so I can't see if any of you said it. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so this has been a very interesting experience. The question might be, you know, how has it been doing a webinar? Or yes, there you go. You're all coming up with it now. Very good. Okay, all right. Now that's it. And we've finished more or less on time. I'm really sorry about the technical hitches. Do any of you have any questions? Okay. Henry, can you help me out here?
I can, certainly. Guys, if you've got any questions before we finish up, then could you quickly write them in the chat box for us? And what I'll do, I think, is try and pick out a few ones I'll keep my eyes peeled for, and then maybe Roisin can answer some of those, okay. And I'll play the quiz master. So type anything in that you'd like to ask. Reluctant students, I saw there mentioned.
There was one about
would you like students? How to deal with?
Oh, right. Okay. What I find, I mean, is what I find with reluctant students. I mean, it depends. I think that you know, quite often sort of like peer pressure and you know, positivity really helps, and also like things like, for example, it depends on the age that you're talking about. Sometimes younger students need a little bit of pushing and helping, and you know, and if you approach the reluctance by, you know, usually there's something that will make them want to participate. So I mean, I find from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, you're always experimenting. Something works for 3 months, then you have to modify it a little bit. It's a case of being on your toes all the time, and just trying and encouraging them and let them know that you value them being there.
Great. And I sort of have a question about particular resources that might be especially useful for this kind of work, Roisin? Is there anything you can...
Of resources?
Yeah.
In what sense?
Either online or Macmillan.
Well, a lot of material that like, for example, I do happen to know, for example, Jeopardy. You can get Jeopardy templates online. Lots of images you can Google. A lot of resources are, for me, are handmade. So yes, that's where I get my resources.
Great. And do you like to do drawing in class? I've just seen someone ask.
Do I like to do drawing in class?
Yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely. And kids love doing drawing as well. I mean, like I am very often. You might do. I use a lot of mini whiteboards, and in pairs or in small groups, and you can do any kind of drawing on that. I mean, like from little children you do a sort of drawing dictation. For example, a monster, I've got 3 eyes, I've got 2 noses, that kind of thing. To, for example, much older students where they have to illustrate something like, he went to a football match yesterday. So, illustrating things like that, and Pictionary type activities. Yes, they love doing that. And also, I do like getting students when they're doing a bit of writing to get them to illustrate their writing. With students about 9, 10, I get them to do some diary work. So when we're introducing the past tense, to get them to write a few sentences in their diary, and I'd like to encourage them to do things like illustrate in a simple way, like for example in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, they're all stick men and stuff, that kind of thing. Yes, drawing I like doing.
Great. A few people are asking about disruptive students as well, so I'll just throw that in too.
Okay, now what I find as well is, well, there are different things that you can do with disruptive students. I've used things like, team activities. Again, I mentioned before about peer pressure. I mean that in the best possible way. But I mean, friends, students like to, well, they have their friends in class, and team activities, awarding points and stuff, are quite fun. And it's also a way to reinforce your expectations for behavior in class as well. And although I don't like taking points away, sometimes taking your point away makes people wake up, and the team around them to go like, hold on a minute. Another thing as well is like a bit of self-evaluation. I think that it's important for you to, students who are disruptive, it's important for you to say to them, like, let them know that they're doing okay. Now, if they've made an effort, to let them know that you appreciate they made the effort. It depends on the age group, but sometimes things like reinforcement, oh, you did really well today, David, might be a little bit, embarrassing for an older child. Whereas you can just say, as opposed, if David has often been disruptive and he'd made an effort, you say something like, "Good one, David," rather than patronizing. Okay. Henry?
Yep, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. Okay. So the one other thing that everyone wants to know by the looks of it is whether you have a blog or not. So.
No, I don't. It's something I'm working on. It's something I'm working on. Yeah. It will come.
Okay.
You know what I'm like.
And are you on Twitter?
Sorry? Am I on Twitter? No.
Are you on Twitter?
No.
Okay.
All right. This is something
Sadly
I should
not,
be doing,
guys.
is it? Okay.
Yeah. Maybe by next
All
year. Right. A lot of people seem to want to contact you. So yes, maybe I can forward on other people's questions to you separately.
You can pass on my email. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant.
All right,
guys. I'll be forwarding on any extra questions that you've got, because I can see there's a lot more, but we're probably not going to manage to answer them all now. So thanks for another great talk. It's a brilliant way to end the first day of our conference. Roisin, would you like to just say a few words to thank everyone for coming along?
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming and for being so participative as well. And I will try and answer your questions if they're passed on to me. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So that was the last of today's talks, and I've just put up a slide to remind you that we'll be back on Wednesday. Sorry. Yeah, we've got the secondary session coming up in the morning. All the times on the slide are GMT, so that's London time. There are websites you can use to convert to your local area if you want to check roughly when that is. So we hope to see you there from 10 in the morning our time, when Dave Spencer will carry on the conference. And tomorrow we've also got a couple of Google Hangouts where you can come in and discuss the conference so far with some of the guys who've already attended. And if you've got any questions, I'll be there as well, just to clarify things with the certificates and the recordings and what have you. And also if you're having any technical problems too, hopefully we can get those sorted out. So I'm going to say bye now, and hope you have a good rest of the day wherever you are. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope you've enjoyed today's talk so far. There's plenty more to come in the week. We've got another 6 talks on Wednesday, and then a further 6 on Friday too, so we're not even halfway yet. All right, take care.